Hey, welcome back to Score on Business. Our next guest is Blaine Weiss. Blaine Weiss is the founder and president of Provincial Development Group, a professional services firm that he launched in 2004. They work with small to mid-sized businesses that have flat or declining revenue to help them achieve their growth objectives. They also assist with transition and exit planning. Additionally, Blaine is the founder and host of the Nashville Leadership Luncheon, held each spring and fall at the Bridgestone Arena. Thanks for being here, Blaine.
Thanks, Pete.
So, Blaine, with what you all do, it really encompasses a lot of areas within the corporation, but let's go to kind of small businesses that are getting up and running. What would you advise an entrepreneur that doesn't have a background in business development, how to grow his or her business until they are big enough to have salespeople?
Sure. So this is a dynamic question, Pete, because it really comes down to the business model that they're dealing within. For instance, if you're a restaurant, your business development model is going to be very different to get customers through the door and eating at your facility than if you're a software company. So the first is to understand how to go to market, who your market is, and what you're going to say to them. Once you have that framework, I encourage people to get educated. Business development is one of the easiest areas of a company to oversimplify. For instance, just saying make more sales calls or talk to more people or hand out more business cards doesn't translate to results necessarily. And so becoming more sophisticated about how to do that is done through education and spending time with folks that are good at it.
Right.
One of the most powerful, inexpensive ways to get educated in this area is to take people who are good at it to lunch and just ask them questions for an hour.
Yeah. And also to make it a priority. One thing we see, I'm sure you see this, is people that are not business development focused and they spend a lot of time on a lot of things, but without customers.
Yes. Yeah. It's interesting because you'll find folks who are very comfortable designing a website or working on their font online or whatever the case may be. And they spend enormous amounts of time on those things that are relatively small in the big scheme of things that don't actually translate to revenue or profit. And then they really struggle to procrastinate, to put time on their calendar for business development. So the one thing that I start with is put that in your calendar and don't put it on Friday afternoon at 3. The reason for that is if you're not comfortable, human nature is to procrastinate and push it off. And if you don't like doing business development, then you can always find something quote-unquote urgent to do in its place.
Yeah. Okay, so what advice would you give a non-sales entrepreneur in hiring and managing their first salesperson?
Well, this is a challenge because to begin with, if you don't have a background in sales, it is usually because you may not be comfortable with it, you may not enjoy it, you may not be that good at it, to speak in frank terms. So the first thing that I start with is understand that person that you hire who is good, who is comfortable, who is competent, is going to be very different in personality from you because it's their unique personality and their unique giftings that makes them successful. It's your unique giftings and your unique personality that qualifies you to do for what you do well. And so one of the mistakes that people make is they look for someone just like themselves, not realizing that hire just like themselves is not going to be necessarily a good fit for the mission.
Absolutely. Yeah. So tell us about a client that you've worked with and what you've achieved with them.
Sure. One of the clients that comes to mind when you ask that is a law firm that we work with here in the area. They were in a very interesting season. They had an aging partner who was the founding partner of the firm. So they were, in many ways, the culture and the tone of the company and the look and feel of the company had been dictated by that partner that had been in that position of leadership for years. So when we start with the client, the first thing that we do is a holistic discovery. And our discovery is going to evaluate their culture, their employee satisfaction, their go-to-market strategy or lack thereof, their digital presence, their financial records in terms of, do you keep good books? Do you know how to keep score financially on whether you win or not? And then once we put together a summary of what we found, we break those into, first, here's where you're doing well, and here's how we think you can continue to sustain that and even get a little bit better. Here's where you're okay, so you're not bleeding, you're not bleeding profusely, where you're going to have a serious issue right away, but you might want to look at beefing this up because here's some of the unintended consequences of being okay. And then here are the areas that we're most concerned about. And then we break that into an action plan with timelines so that everyone's clear. And then when we engage with the client, whether it be this law firm or another law firm, the most unique thing about our model is how involved we are with the execution piece. So, Pete, if you had a company and we were working with you, the first thing that we're going to ask is, if you agree with our assessment, what can you do by just redeploying the resources you have now? Because it makes no sense for you to spend money with me when you can do that on your own. Well, maybe 80% of what we've recommended they can do on their own, but maybe there's 20% that they can't help with internally, and that's where we come into play to help shore that up and lend our expertise to getting those results in order.
Awesome. Well, let's take a break, and we'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen.